Hi, I'm Ruchika from CleverTap, and today I have with me Sashwati Banerjee, who's an entrepreneur and a consultant at CSF. Hi, Sashwati.
Hi, Ruchika.
Thank you so much, Sashwati, for taking out time for this interview.
My
It really means
pleasure.
a lot.
Not at all. My pleasure.
Sashwati, to begin with, we would love to understand a bit about CSF and their mission.
Sure. So CSF is actually Central Square Foundation. It's a philanthropic organization. It's about 8 years old now. It was set up by Ashish Dhawan, and it has grown in over the 8 years that it's been in existence. The core area of work that CSF does is really how to improve the quality of education, particularly within the school system, and how to really transform education so that foundational literacy and numeracy becomes better in this country. They predominantly work in India, and they work across three broad categories. One is that they work directly with state governments as well as the central government to really look at what elements could improve or strengthen or reform the public education system, predominantly with the government school system. And this can range from looking at classroom instructional practices, introduction of education technology in classrooms, better teacher training, building teacher capacities, or just systemic reform stuff. The second big area that they kind of work in is policy. So really looking at how to influence policy, when it comes to improving the overall education system in India. And the third broad area is that they actually provide early stage grant support to organizations, entrepreneurs like myself, innovators who are really looking at catalyzing the ecosystem. So these could be in education technology solutions, not just for kids, but also, with respect to maybe teacher apps. They were instrumental, in fact, in bringing Khan Academy to India many years. So a long history of really working in education with a very core focus on early years and foundational numeracy and literacy. So that's pretty much what CSF does.
That's really interesting to know. Can you also help me understand your target audience?
Before I talk about the target audience, let me just tell you that I think it is really critical for us to understand the importance of early years. And it has been a highly neglected area in this country. And early childhood education has always taken a back seat against higher education, etc. Right? But scientifically speaking, and evidence tells us that 90% of brain development happens between the ages of 0 to 8, right? And the neuron connections that are formed during these years really lays the foundation for children's learning, behaviors, etc. Right? So it is critical and it is formative, right? And unfortunately, in India, for years, we see, including Anganwadis who are doing exceptional work and continue to do exceptional work, the focus, unfortunately, has always been on nutrition rather than really high quality early childhood education. So as a result of that, what's happening is that millions and millions of children every year enter the formal school system with very low or no school readiness skills. And this is especially true of the base of the pyramid population, right? Because they are mostly first generation learners. And as a result of that, they have, no parental support at home and no informal support of accessing these skills. So what's happening is that they get into grade 1, then they are kind of mandated to kind of follow the syllabus, etc. And then, ASAR, which is the annual status education report, every year pretty much says, X percentage of children in India cannot read at grade level. They cannot do basic math. Now, these are two fundamental skills. If you want the child to succeed in life, these are really the foundational skills that a child needs, right? So there is a wide body of evidence that basically now talks about the fact that how family engagement is central to learning. because according to World Bank estimates, 90% of a child's time during these critical years are actually spent at home, not in school. Okay, or 80% maybe, right? Because they're young, right? They attend school for 2-3 hours, they come back, they're mostly at home. So providing parental support is very, very critical. And in low-resourced countries and low-resourced countries and with low-resourced populations, parents very often feel like they are not empowered because they themselves are not literate or have low levels of literacy. They feel disempowered and they don't know how to really provide the right kind of stimulus so that the child is constantly learning, irrespective of whether the child is in a center or outside of the center. So my project is really about addressing this basic need gap in low-income populations in India, right? To really help equip and support the parents so that they become more empowered, they feel that they are contributing to their child's growth and education and development. So
That's really interesting, and I would really want to know how exactly that's happening, because I could really connect with all the points you said, and like how you have pictured the entire problem statement. And I would like to know the solution now.
okay, so the solution is a tech solution, right? And in this day and age, the reason why we embarked on a tech solution was that we are seeing, in India at least, that technology has had an exponential growth, and barring the current economic recession, the fact is that the growth of smartphones, penetration of connectivity, low data cost, has all kind of over the last few years ensured that more people are connected through mobiles than less people. Okay, and this is particularly true in urban India. But in urban India, you also have the urban poor. In our heads, we always tend to think, oh, the poor lives somewhere else, and everybody else lives somewhere else. But that's not true. There is a high amount of urban poverty. Migration brings families to cities. They don't have any structures to kind of support them like they would do back home or whatever, right? So our solution really is a very simple parent-facing app. We've designed it as a progressive web app with an Android wrapper. It has been designed specifically keeping in mind that we are partnering, or we want to really reach people who probably have very low-end smartphones, right? Might not have a lot of storage on those phones. So we really wanted to design something that was very light, that was very easy, where the UX and the UI, was appealing to them. They would see value in something like that. And in order to develop that, we really used a human-centric design each and every step of the process, right? So we kind of asked users, did research across not just Delhi, but also like Gurgaon and Bhopal with this population to ask, what is it that they feel? And the one word they kept using, and this is a Hindi word, it says saksham, which means like, I don't feel I'm capable, right? And we really wanted to address that problem head on. So the app is very easy to use, and it has two sections. It has a section for parents, and the parent section predominantly uses videos where it's hoping to provide them with knowledge and information that they can use in a day-to-day basis, not just around reading and math, but around what we call early childhood domain areas, okay, which is cognitive development, which is beyond numbers and letters, also looking at stuff like task persistence or listening to instructions or problem solving, developing critical thinking, and these are all scaffolded learning that happens, right? And parents really facilitate that learning. So then we are also looking at social emotional learning as a big component, and this has been very useful also for us to have thought about that, because it came from the parents that, how do we build social emotional skills in children? So we've included content around that. And in the COVID, it's even more essential, right? Because kids are really facing so many challenges, and so are parents. They're just stuck at home with each other all through the day. Nutrition, physical well-being, little things like parents told us, I have a very fussy eater, my child doesn't want to eat, right? So what do you tell the parent? Okay. And child protection, which came up as a big concern issue, particularly in Delhi and Gurgaon. It came up as a big concern area that we are very concerned about child protection. So in layman's language and in an easy, simple format, just letting them know, maybe this is what you can do, or showing them, here are what other users are doing. Maybe you can apply some of this and see if it works for you, right? Because every family is different, every individual is different. We don't really know what's working, what's not working. So that's one. We have also designed a quiz, which is called a top quiz. And basically it takes the parent or reinforces their learning by giving them some very specific questions, right? Like, how many words should your child know by the time the child is 5 years of age? That stuff like that. And we are designing, we still haven't done it, is like a rewards recognition program, so that we can also incentivize the parent to remain engaged, not just with the app, but also with the process of education, self-education, and mediation of education with their kids. And then we have a child section where we have actually done a lot of work at the back end to identify solutions for kids, right? And like I said, because Central Square Foundation also funds early stage products and startup and ecosystems, they have actually funded this product called Chimple, which was one of the X Prize finalists. They are a Bangalore-based organization. And I don't know if just X Prize very briefly is something that was funded by Elon Musk about 2 years ago. And it was an open call grand challenge that looked at technology solutions that would help improve grade reading and early math for children who were out of school or not have any access to school in rural Africa, East Africa. And they had deployed this. So Chimple was one of the finalists. So CSF really funded them to see if the product can be made available, tweak for the mobile platform, more gamified, because, tablet use, some control situations versus mass market. So we have to do all of that stuff. Then we also have Math Masti, which is actually also another X Prize winner. It was called Kit School. And because one of the requirements of X Prize was that everything should be open source, again, Central Square Foundation really provided the support to contextualize Math Masti for India and for the 3 to 8 age group. And then there's Google's launched this fantastic product called Bolo, which people might be aware of. But Bolo teaches kids oral reading fluency, and it uses a proprietary speech technology to do it. So it's available in English, Hindi, and I think 7 other Indian languages. So those are the 3 apps that we have recommended. We had parameters for selection of the apps. We wanted to ensure that they are free of cost. We didn't want parents of this income population to really spend money to access solutions. 2, we wanted to make sure that there was some evidence of efficacy on these products around the world. And because X Prize had already tested them through an independent research, we had some evidence around Chimple and Math Masti. And then Bolo, of course, has been doing intensive research. While we have initially recommended these 3 solutions, our aim is really to recommend more and more solutions as we go along across all the development domain areas, right? And we are constantly seeking partnerships both in India as well as outside of it. So it's a very, very simple app. Okay, that's pretty much what it is. And what we have done is that for Chimple and Math Masti, we have integrated the product at the back end, so that we are able to get some child level data. And what we really would like to do is actually report that back out to parents so that they also feel invested in seeing how their child is progressing and learning, what levels are associated with, what competencies, etc. So we've also kind of looked at an engagement mechanism to constantly engage with the parent. It's very nascent and it's very new, but that's hopefully is something that we are going to strengthen as we start getting more data.
And I think it's super critical, particularly at this time, like during the COVID era, while everyone is getting dependent on their parents and on homeschooling. And like you said, parents feel that they are not capable enough, like saksham, and it can help them maybe with the first building blocks of how to do it, like first few steps. So
Absolutely.
super amazing. I also read about a very interesting story about the launch of Top Parent, which happened in MP, and it would be great if you can tell us about that.
So I think we've had a lot of endorsement from state governments, right? And MP really was the first one. And this, I would say, really thanks to Central Square Foundation's work and their push to say that, in this particular time, it is essential to have something that could help us reach parents in a better way. So while I think pretty much now all the state governments are doing some program or the other to make sure that children are not losing out. One of the big challenges has always been how do you keep the parent in the loop? And like I already said that, for the early years, mediation and facilitation is an important aspect of learning process, right? So when child is in Anganwadi center or in school, right, whether it's a low-cost private school or government school, they have the teacher as the mediator, right? But nowadays, when kids are at home, the parent essentially becomes the mediator, right? And 3 to 8, in that sense, is a fairly large age group if you think about it, because how a 3-year-old learns is not how an 8-year-old will learn, and what they are learning, right? So we also needed to look at solutions that would help us straddle from emergent literacy to what we call foundational literacy, emergent numeracy to foundational numeracy, right? So we actually did a presentation to the education department of MP, and we said, we demonstrated the app to them, and we said, do you think this will be helpful? And they were very excited, and they said, yeah, we don't have anything like this, but the thing is, they were doing a lot of stuff, right? They had, they had this DGILP program, DGLEP program. So they had curated like a lot of content from different content people. A lot of it was just video based, and they had really set up, these clusters which teachers had parents on WhatsApp groups, and they were like really kind of trying to get this out, and they thought this would be a really good addition, particularly because because of school closure, right, the grade 1 enrollment didn't happen. So they're like, oh my god, like what do we do for the 3 to 6 year olds, right? Because the 3 to 6 actually come under the Ministry of Women and Child Development. It doesn't come under the Human Resource Development Ministry. So they said, yeah, we are very excited, and we want to do this, but we want the CM to launch it. So we said, oh my God, what do we do now? So anyway, I think we really got our act together because frankly, Ruchika, between you and I think the product is still very prototype stage, right? I mean, our whole intention initially was that we would test it, we will refine it, like any digital app company or product does, right? Like we want to get it right. But then as social development professionals and organizations, we also feel like, hey, if this is a solution that can help at this time, then forget it. We might not be 100%, but we really need to be out there, right? And really kind of be at the forefront of doing whatever we can to contribute. So we said, okay, we'll launch. So then the date was set, and you know how it is with the government, right? Like you have to give us this, you have to give us that, then it would take time, then then suddenly last minute at night, they would say, oh, tomorrow is the launch. Okay. So we were like really on tenterhooks, and we didn't know how, because, one of the things we had to get done was actually list it on the Google Play Store. And because of COVID, that process, which generally I think takes between 48 to 72 hours,
Yeah,
was taking weeks. So even though we had applied, just wasn't getting listed. So, the launch was scheduled for the 8th of May, the announcement. And, on the 5th, we kind of, gave it to the Play Store. And they said, no, it's not right or something like that. Then we had to like quickly do something. And then, I'm not a tech person, but I'm saying there was obviously a lot going on in the background. But eventually we did get it listed. And as part of the use of digital technology as a way to combat the COVID crisis for children's education and development, the Chief Minister actually launched or endorsed Top Parent as part of, what the Madhya Pradesh government was doing for the states. So once that happened, I think we started seeing a lot of downloads initially. A few days later, I think the UP Chief Minister announced, solutions that they were providing, and Top Parent was one of the recommended solutions in their overall mission Prerna. I think 2 days ago, we got a tweet from the Deputy Chief Minister of Bihar, Mr. Sushil Modi, talking about Top Parent and how parents should really can help their child learn at home during this crisis. So I think we've really been very lucky in that way to kind of get this kind of support and encouragement. And I'm forever grateful to Central Square Foundation to really kind of use their work with the government to kind of seed this. And I think that it's going to be a very critical solution even post-COVID, right? Because to get the family, the school, and the child connected in that triangle, which is really where you see maximum transformational growth, I think this product can play a really good role. I think the other partnership I want to mention is TikTok. I think they've been extremely generous. They ran a 4-day promotional campaign totally free of cost for us. And we saw a huge amount of interest and traction, and hopefully resulted in a lot more downloads, etc. So they were very helpful. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. It was really interesting to know how you're collaborating with multiple state government and how you're ensuring that education becomes more accessible. So after this, when it comes to letting users know about Top Parents, so how are you guys doing that? Like, what are the channels you are using? And also, if there's any particular channel that works better for you as compared to others?
I think the primary channel is really the data that CleverTap gives us and how we really use that data to talk to parents through notifications or WhatsApp, etc. Right? I mean, and our hope is that as we start getting more and more data, we can, personalize, move from right now largely a generalized notification system to a way more personalized notification system, right? And really relying on CleverTap to help us do that, because that is, I think, critical, right? Then, of course, there are all these other mediums, Ruchika, like Facebook. We now have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter page, but that's not where our users are generally, right? I mean, our users are really on TikTok, so we are on TikTok. They're on Facebook, so we are on Facebook. They use WhatsApp and then some YouTube, right? I mean, those are really, if you ask anybody, all the research we've done is like, these are the 4 things that people use maximum. So it's actually been very interesting, right? Because we also recognize something that even if people are not digitally superbly literate, they instinctively figure out how to use things. They recognize, apps by colors and icons, right? So they're very familiar, and they're happy posting their stuff on TikTok and Facebook. A lot of the users told us that the day doesn't begin for us unless we wake up in the morning and send good morning messages through WhatsApp. Yeah, so it's actually been quite an interesting experience. But I think user engagement is really one of those really tough things. And I think anybody who works in this space will know that I don't have the answers. I don't know what's going to appeal to them, what's not going to appeal to them. But one of the things we are doing is we are actually talking to a lot of our users. Understanding what is it that they're liking, what is it that they would like to see, so that it can we can integrate that both into our content management system, as well as, how we set up the events in CleverTap, but also how we can improve our product going forward. So those are, I think, some of the ways.
It's good to know that you're exploring CleverTap at such a level, like you are exploring events and you plan to make your notification and messaging more personalized. So if I ask you maybe to give me a one or two liner about the overall experience that you have with CleverTap so far, then what would you say?
Okay, I don't really use CleverTap, but Atul, who's my colleague and who's our product person, he's really the guy who uses it the most. I think what it really is helping us do right now is helping us look at data in a very digestible format. So when we have team meetings, Atul kind of projects it on the screen and he takes us through what are the different kinds of diagnostics we can get through CleverTap. And obviously this is dependent upon the kinds of events, etc. we've set up, but largely I think it gives us a big picture around, what is user behavior, what kind of videos are they watching the most, whether they're playing the quiz, not playing the quiz, whether they have really downloaded the child app, whether the child apps have been used or not used, if they've been used, for how long have they been used, what levels of activities have been completed, etc. So at a very broad level, it's actually giving us data that we are literally seeing on a daily basis and making decisions as we go along, right? And like I keep saying, I think, or Atul actually keeps telling me, this is too nascent, you need more data to like really map trends. And I understand where he's coming from. But like, for example, I'll give you one very basic example is that, we saw from CleverTap that we were losing parents on the quiz, right? And people were playing, so there was very high engagement, but then there was a big drop. And we didn't understand what was going on. And, initially we had said that we leave the quiz open, but then we said that, we're also a non-profit, we're also struggling with, we're under-resourced, we're struggling with budgets, etc. So we said, we have to keep building our bank of quizzes, but right now, because we have a limited bank and because it's the launch, right, let's figure out people are liking it, not liking it, whatever. And we had told users that, they were only allowed to play like 2 per category or per level or something like that, right? And then the one pop-up used to come up and say, your quota for the day is finished, so you can't play it. So we were seeing drop-offs, and that information we got from CleverTap. Then we started calling users and we said, do you like, they said, we love Top Quiz. So if you love Top Quiz, then why aren't you playing? They said, why aren't you giving us more questions? So, so based on that, we are now changing the way people interact with the quiz, right? So that's just one. I can give you a very recent, this is a concrete thing about, how that data and then triangulated with our more human-centric, let's talk to the user, let's really ask them if this is the problem, right? So, yeah, I think it's a nice mix of, I guess, quantity, quality.
So that's a really interesting use case when it comes to CleverTap. And it was really nice to know the entire story about CSF, about Top Parent, how you're collaborating with others and like working towards your mission. Just as a last question, I would want to know what's next? What's next for Top Parent? How does the future look like?
I think very concretely right now is an evolving process as we go along. So that's really, I guess, a core focus right now is, making sure that that we keep the engagement level high. We really kind of move into more personalized engagement. We, based on data we are getting, we really try and see which message works, which doesn't, etc., etc. I think that's really one. I think the second is that we definitely need, more solutions edtech solutions that address, um, you know, all kinds of development areas for kids. And our gamified kids are willing to play and learn from there. And that's something that Center Square Foundation anyway is working towards doing. I think the third thing is that we really need to build very strong partnerships and collaborate with partners who see this as something that is also, going to help them. And if they're kind of mission driven, etc., to really help us expand within our geographies beyond where we are currently. And then last but not the least is, I think, in the near future, really to see how we can expand beyond our geographies and make the app available to non-Hindi speaking populations as well. Because, India has so many languages and kids learn the best in mother tongue. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's a very tough road to have. Yeah.
And we hope to keep supporting you throughout your journey.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sashwati. This really means a lot. And thanks for sharing everything about CSF, about Top Parent.
Welcome, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Yes. Bye-bye.